Hey everyone, my name is Taryn, and thank you so much for stopping by my channel this week, Nicole Flower House. My channel is all about my cut flower garden, and I'm located in Zone 7B. It is already time for seedlings and tulips and things to start blooming soon. It's funny how the winter seems so long and so short at the same time. This first set of seedlings you see here are a mistake I made. Apparently you are supposed to direct seed cress, and I started it in seed trays. They don't look that great. I'll still probably plant these to see what happens, but I will also direct sow some of these later on. These seedlings are ornamental kale. They will flower. I've never grown these before, but they look really strong and sturdy. I've noticed that anything that is a vegetable seems to grow faster than flower seeds. I start my flower seeds about 4 weeks earlier than I used to start my vegetables. My Hellebore plant here has looked like this for a while. I'm not sure if these blooms are damaged or if they will eventually flower. I may give them a few more weeks and then cut this back and see if it reblooms. This other Hellebore plant is the one I cut all the blooms off in a video a few weeks ago, and it has sent up more flowers. So that's always exciting, so I can cut those, or I may just leave those. My anemones are starting to put on more flowers. I love anemones, they're so pretty. These first blooms are still on the short side, but that's okay. When they get more sunlight, I think they will get taller. This bed is a little patchy. You are supposed to soak anemones before you plant them, and I didn't do that, so I'm guessing that played a big role. Also, I could tell something had dug through and eaten some of my corms. We've had some very cold nights lately, down into the low 20s, and I've had some of my ranunculus plants die back. That's okay though, I do have more corms. I could start and transplant to fill the holes, or I could just let those go. If I do plant new ones, that will be a nice succession of ranunculus. My tulips are starting to pop up. I'm so happy about this. Last year, all of my tulips came up at the same time. So this year, I made an intentional effort to get varieties that bloomed at different times. So as we go through these tulip beds, you will notice the patchiness, or how some are coming up and some aren't. Last year, I barely had any tulips left at Easter weekend, and I didn't have any for Mother's Day, so I'm hoping this year that won't be the case. This is a seedling. I'm gonna leave this here. It's a volunteer, either Dara or Leia, I'm not sure. This ranunculus bed doesn't have any damage to it, and it's looking really nice and lush. So hopefully we'll get blooms from that in the next few months. This bed right here has one row of ranunculus at the end because I didn't have space in the other beds, followed by some more tulips coming up. And this is what I was talking about earlier. The patchiness is an intentional thing where I was trying to stagger the harvest of the tulips. It's hard for me not to worry about the tulips that aren't coming up because it kind of feels weird that some of them are popping up and some of them aren't. But hopefully that is due to the differences in the varieties and their expected bloom times. The dryness of the soil right here is also bugging me a little bit. If I have time, I will go back and put some mulch on here just to help with that. But I may be better off just waiting until I plant the next round of seedlings in these garden beds. These were planted in January of this year, and they are planted in what is called egg carton style. So all of the tulip bulbs are very close together. They are not touching though. There's a little bit of space in between each one, and so that is why the blooms are so close together. This is a very common way to plant tulips for cut flower gardens and for flower farming. It maximizes the space, and you can fit a ton of tulip bulbs in a very small area. This year I have about 3,800 tulip bulbs planted, which is more than double what I planted last year. These tags that came with my tulip bulbs this year from Color Blends has the bloom time right on them, so that's super convenient. You can see the differences. Some say mid, some say late. Some of these are blends, that's why there's different timing on them. So some of the tulips in the blend are early and some of them are mid and some of them are late. This bed has so many weeds in it, and I'm worried that this is creating kind of a mat of roots that's preventing some of these tulips to come up. So this weekend I will be working on this bed a lot, trying to get the shallow root mat out that's from the weeds so the tulips have a better chance of coming up. It's kind of a bummer. I may have ruined some of these tulips, but I'll do my best to correct it, and if it doesn't work, there's still plenty of others that are going to bloom just fine. I've also noticed that some of these tulips that are popping up aren't matching what's on the timing on the label. Some of my early and mids aren't up, and some of the mids to late are already up, so maybe I mislabeled them, or it's just very zone specific and there's some variation in the timing. I'm also really enjoying how the different foliages have different hues. Some are very green and some have a little bit of a blue or purple tinge to them. I didn't notice that in previous years. This is a blue-winged wasp. Now these wasps are very good to have in your garden. They lay their eggs on grubs for Japanese beetles, so they're a parasitic wasp. And they're also very docile. They don't really come after you and sting you unless you accidentally threaten them in some way. And I've had these all over my celosia and flowers all summer long, and they don't really bother you, even when you're cutting flowers that they're on. These are my tulip crates. This is a different company that I got these tulips from, and they have actual months on the labels, but they're coming up sooner than what is on these labels, so maybe it's just zone dependent. And here's a quick recap of all the varieties that I have planted this year. I'm hoping they all come up, but we'll have to see. I was really hoping to get all different colors at all different times throughout the spring season, just to have more variety and a more intentional display of color. I didn't really have any strategy as far as placement in the garden beds. Maybe next season I will group them either by color or bloom time, put them in rainbow order, something like that. I was trying to just get these into the ground as quick as possible, so they ended up in a very random place. The tulips I got from Color Blends were pre-chilled for me, so I didn't have to worry about that. But the ones I got from another company, I needed to keep in the fridge for a while, so it was just time to get them all out into the garden. Here's an update on my seedlings that are inside. The ones we saw earlier were already in the hardening off process. This is the first year where I've kind of planted all my seeds into one little cell and then transplanted those seedlings out into individual cells. I've learned a lot. This is the first year I've tried it. I don't think I'll do this again. When I first started this out, I didn't have my trays under lights, and I was waiting for the seedlings to pop up before I would transplant them into their own cells and then put them under lights. But the seedlings were not popping up all at the same time. There were several days between seedlings. So for example, the Silene Blushing Lanterns right there, you can see some are more mature than others. And if I don't get those under the lights, they're not going to do well. But I found if you transplant them really, really young, they died off. So what I ended up doing is bringing my lights inside from the garage because the garage is too cold for germination. And I'm just going to go back to how I used to do things, where I put just 1 or 2 seeds per cell instead of trying to transplant and move them around. There's different methods depending on how much space you have available and how much time you have available. I'm glad I've tried this because I always thought it would be nice to have very uniform trays and not have any holes but the extra hassle of trying to transplant all the seedlings out once they germinated was a little too much for me to fit into my schedule. I've killed a lot of seedlings by transplanting them too early. Here's an update on my willow. I did a video on my willow not too long ago about propagating it and making wreaths. I was able to get about 120 new plants. Even these little tiny sticks sprouted new green growth, so I'll be able to transplant all of these out. My goal was to get 100, so I have met that goal, and I'm really excited to have so many new willow plants this year. And this will allow me to make wreaths from materials that I've grown myself locally in my own flower garden. Well, that is all for today's video. I hope you enjoyed this update. If you did, give me a thumbs up. And the best way you can support me and my channel is to subscribe and share it with your flower-loving friends. I'll see you next time. Bye.